Alone on a Friday night? God, you're pathetic.
Hello everyone, Adwin's back with another review of the Magia Record anime, and tonight we are covering episodes 8 and 9 of the anime, which correlate to Chapter 5 in the game. I'm doing another double feature because, well, honestly I'm starting to burn out, and I feel like there wasn't much to talk about in episode 8 anyway, so here I am. Hopefully I'll keep this video relatively concise and focused. That said, I feel like it makes sense to lump these two episodes together because they both encompass Sana's arc. Episode 8 is the slower build-up episode of this arc, focusing on Iroha's adjustment to her new life. After moving in with Yachio and Felicia in the Mikitsuki Villa, she gets transferred to the city's university-affiliated school, which gladly happens to house Tsuruno and the KMR trio as well. So at least she's not going to be completely alone, but it doesn't seem like any of those people are actually in her classes. So she's still alone in this new environment, and she feels out of place. I feel like they express this pretty well, especially when some of her new classmates try to invite her to lunch, but unfortunately she rejects them. Now, it's suggested based on screenshots on her phone that she wanted to try to meet with Kaede to eat lunch with her, and that's why she didn't want to eat with anyone else yet. But it was also clear that it made her look kind of standoffish. And it kind of made me feel bad because now everyone's going to try to avoid her, and that just makes me sad because at her old school she at least had friends, but I can't really imagine her being the most social person. But I think that's pretty obvious. Anyway, she actually runs into Rena, of all people, and Rena tells her about a couple new rumors, like the rumor of the invisible girl, which is just a girl who's invisible. Now, that in itself isn't too interesting, but what I really liked about it was that in the visuals of explaining the rumor, they use Iroha as a stand-in for the invisible girl. So parallels are starting to pop up, and I really like it. It also helps that soon after, well, I guess the next day, but still pretty soon in the episode, but Iroha is called to the police station to pick up Felicia, who had started a fight for talking shit about Iroha and Yachio. That's all well and good, and it's kinda sweet, but Iroha's association with Felicia actually ruins her reputation fairly quickly. No one wants to sit around her, and it made me sad. I knew this was gonna happen. But anyway, like I said, I really like how they re-emphasized Iroha's tendency for isolation, because it's going to be important in the upcoming plot. But speaking of plots, let's get back to the rumors. Rena tells us about the Endless Solitude, where you'd be trapped in solitude forever. And apparently, there were already instructions on how to actually get there. But these instructions were recently deleted. Then Tsuruno tells us about the Electric Wave Girl, where if you stand under a radio tower with your cell phone, you'll hear a girl crying for help. But when Iroha and Felicia try it out, they hear a girl laughing. Oh, and Iroha gets some spam text from this unknown sender. But it turns out it's not actually spam, and someone's actually in need of help. This was honestly one of the worst parts of the episode, because if Iroha had bothered to read this, there was no way she could have concluded that this was spam. In fact, she does read them, and she does think it's weird, but she still blows it off as spam. And under normal circumstances, this would just be written off as Iroha being stupid. But I think it's a bigger issue in this context because it's kind of halting the plot for no reason. This episode's main issue is it felt like nothing was really happening or progressing. Sure, we find out a little bit more about some new rumors, but the information is just fed to us pretty quickly actually. So even though we're getting set up with what's coming next, we don't really feel any tension, emotional stakes, build up, anything to get us excited for that next episode. I think that's because Iroha and the team aren't really investigating these rumors, at least not yet. Like I just said, the information was just fed to us. They didn't really look into any of it other than trying the Electric Wave Girl rumor. It's not until Iroha actually answers the text that things start to get a little bit more interesting. So remember how Yachio kind of discouraged Iroha from responding to the text? What if Yachio caught on that this could be related to the rumor and encouraged her to respond? And after responding, Ai-chan started to tell her a little bit more about the situation, then we would have been pulled into the mystery. Who is Ai? Why did she contact Iroha? What is her purpose? What is her favorite color? Anyway, imagine these questions going through your head as we uncover more of these rumors. At least with this way we would have had a little more insight into what's really going on as other information was fed to us, similar to how we were introduced to the Wings of Magius relatively slowly, with the implication that someone is hoarding witches, and also in episodes 6 and 7, where they were properly introduced, but we still didn't know what they were really after. For what it's worth, they actually did this in the game story too, but the point is, there was no reason for them to ignore the text, and it would have made this storyline a lot more interesting. But moving on, at the start of episode 9, we have our conversation with Ai, where she reveals that she is indeed a rumor. And the rumor was actually kind of believable, as in like it's an AI that was developed to have conversation, but then it was scrapped, and it wants to kidnap people so it can have people to converse with. I mean, it's certainly more believable than a staircase that breaks friendships or water that gives you 24 lucky things. But anyway, as an AI, it became more self-aware and realized that what it was doing, kidnapping these poor girls, was morally wrong, and it actually wants to be stopped. We find out that the site with the instructions on how to get to Endless Solitude was made by Ai-chan, but Ai was also the one who deleted it in an effort to stop people from going. But in order to be dealt with for good, she goes to Iroha, who she knows is hunting rumors down. You know, something about this entire scene just kind of impressed me. Now, I don't want to say it's the most creative or the most clever thing I've seen out of a situation like this. It's probably neither of those things, but especially compared to previous rumors, this is definitely more clever than those. From the believable urban legend to Ai's methods to her self-awareness, it all just seemed to tie together really well. It's a very nice contrast to the previous episode, where a lot was happening but it wasn't that engaging. Meanwhile, in this episode, not a lot is physically happening, but I'm still engaged with this conversation happening with Ai. And then Ai reveals that her current victim is Sana Futaba. Oh, and I should mention that at the very beginning of the episode, it gives us a very interesting reminder of the rumor of the Invisible Girl. Though it's not as stylized as the previous rumor introductions, it's still very entertaining to watch, and honestly I just love all these rumor introduction animation thingies. It's just such a delight. Anyway, since only one person can enter the Endless Solitude at a time, understandably, Iroha volunteers to be the one. And just as she enters, we switch perspectives to Sana herself. We basically hear her tragic backstory, where a very poor family situation led her to wish to be invisible, and eventually getting to the point where she would rather separate herself from reality and be in the Endless Solitude. She meets and befriends Ai, and leads into probably one of the cutest scenes in the entire anime. I mean, look, it's small animal just look at me, just happy face, and then lick it to checkmate. It's a cutie. But anyway, she ends this whole monologue by saying, yeah, sure, she already came to the Endless Solitude of her own volition, but after befriending Ai, she doesn't want to leave. And by now, she had been in the Solitude for over a month. This section clearly wants to establish Sana and Ai's friendship, which is fine because it's a very strong driver for this part of the plot. But as Sana is innocently drawing in the sand, Iroha pops up and ruins everything. And the poor girl looks really betrayed when she finds out that I was the one who brought her here. And she's far from convinced to leave the solitude despite Iroha and Ai's protests. But to help things along, enter everyone's favorite psychopath, Alina Gray. See, there was already a lot to love about this episode, but Alina's appearance was just so fun. Her posing and movements, her smugness, her self-interest, she's just having a lot of fun doing what she does, and she gives no fucks what anyone else thinks. It's only helped by the very sinister tone that she has throughout the entire interaction. She was just so much fun to watch. Even when she starts to get serious near the end of the fight, getting exasperated with Sana's interference, and then I just copy-paste her away from the fight. That was just hilarious. But then it kind of swiftly goes back to a somber moment between Sana and I, and surprisingly it didn't feel so jarring. The fight took a toll on Ai, and thus it's more imperative for her to be deleted at this point. And it leads into this really heartfelt goodbye between the two friends. And at the behest of Ai's last wishes, Sana goes to the real world with Iroha. Now, if it wasn't clear, I really love this episode. Even in the game story, this was definitely one of the better arcs, cause it was engaging, it was smart, it was heartfelt, emotional, and a lot of fun to watch. And with the pacing of the anime being so all over the place, it's almost surprising that they were able to do all this fairly well within one episode. Even the friend of mine who didn't really like the anime even up to this point said that he really liked this episode. It was definitely the best of the self-contained arcs in the anime. But when you want to compare this to how it's presented in the game, there's a lot of little problems that add up. And there's been quite a bit of discussion on these inconsistencies. A lot of discussion on it. For example, in the game, Iroha just goes into the Endless Solitude on her own, but in the anime, she was arguing with Yachio, and then the only reason she went into the Solitude was to go after Mokyu. So it kind of takes away Iroha's independence and agency, since in the anime, Mokyu was taking the lead instead of Iroha. And it's even more annoying because Mokyu never appeared after this scene. Oh my god. So going into this, I promised myself that I wouldn't go into detail about these little arguments, and yet here I am. But I at least want to mention that this episode didn't really tie in with the main Magia's plot as well as it did in the game story. There was also the increased focus on Sana Ai, the lack of interaction between Iroha and Sana, and just the entire existence of Alina in this episode. Now, from what I could tell, the general audience really liked Alina, but some of the others who were really passionate about her, they just had a lot of problems with the way she was presented. I was honestly surprised. Anyway, I do have to admit that the setup for the next episode was pretty weak, as Iroha's teammates just randomly deduce that they will be exiting the Solitude at some other random tower. I should mention that this part of the story I'm a little hazy on when it comes to the game itself, but after such a satisfying conclusion of the episode, I'm not exactly excited to see the next one. I mean, of course I'm excited to see the next one and I'm gonna see it, but nothing's really like pulling me towards that. You know what I mean? Well, we'll see what happens in the last 3 episodes of the season, but before I go for the day, I want to bring up one important thing. Remember when I brought up the cold open where the rumor of the invisible girl was being explained? Well, Sana was there for all that, and you know, there was the whole weird, stylish stuff going on around her. But later, during one of Sana's flashbacks, we see the same 2 girls, but they have faces. They're just sitting normally, eating their food without doing these weird dances, talking about rumors. This kind of makes me wonder how reliable Sana's point of view really is. Was that opening scene just from Sana's perspective, and the second scene is from an outsider's? And compare that to when she was talking about her backstory, which still had that stylized animation, but was clearly not taking place in either the real world nor Ai's world. To say nothing of the fact that her family was represented by shadow puppets of like animals and stuff, and then later by faceless paintings, coupled with how cartoonishly cruel her parents were when talking to her, it's honestly hard to believe that this was not fabricated by Sana's imagination. Like, it's likely that Sana's family did treat her this poorly, and despite how ridiculous her parents sounded, I'm sure that there are parents who actually talk to their kids like this. But in the context of these flashbacks, I can't help but wonder if Sana's general depression and lack of self-worth warped her perspective on things. Now, I don't want to sound like I'm calling Sana a liar or anything, but we should be aware of this kind of mindset and what it can do to a person. And as someone who has experienced it himself, and from those around him, I have to say I'm glad that they've addressed it. Thank you guys so much, and I'll see you next week.